Hello and welcome back to IndustryBroadcast.com for audio article number 71. Today's audio article is written by Pascal Lubin, who is the founder and manager of GameDesignStudio.com. For the past 14 years, Pascal has been designing games, working with such huge names as Ubisoft, SCE, DICE, Darkworks, Next Gen Studios, Cryo Networks, G Media, Monte Cristo, and View Games. His last major assignment was designing CTF Tornado, the leading map of Agia's UT3 Extreme Physics mod. Previously, he had been the lead level designer and playtest coordinator on the world-acclaimed multiplayer mode of Splinter Cell, Pandora Tomorrow, and Chaos Theory, developed and published by Ubisoft. Before getting his feet wet in the games industry, Mr. Lubin was in charge of corporate planning for Panasonic France, as well as doing consultant work for the strategy consulting firm Solving International. Mega audio article number 71, written by Pascal Lubin, entitled Megatrends of Game Design, read aloud by Ryan Wienko on the 8th of February, 2009. Megatrends of Game Design. The purpose of this series of articles is to attempt to shed some light on emerging trends likely to influence game design philosophy, and therefore our industry at large in the next few years. Rather than an essay in futurology, which is by definition very hypothetical, the trends described in these articles are already in motion, so the question we should ask ourselves is not whether these trends will appear, but rather what their impact will be on video game design. I hope that these articles will be food for thought. Enjoy. Megatrend number 1. The necessity of increasing the commercial lifespan of games. Development costs continuously increase. This phenomenon is especially true for AAA titles representing the driving force behind major publishers. Yet the commercial lifespans of such titles are surprisingly brief, a few months and sometimes less. Beyond the initial commercial blitz of the release dates, most games quickly exit the main stage for good, overthrown by the new crop of AAA titles everybody is waiting for. Only a later budget version or the release of an expansion will renew the attention given to a game. Publishers are therefore facing a very risky situation. They must commit large investments 18 to 24 months before a game's release and require a return within a very brief period, all whilst hoping the competition will have the decency not to beat them to the post with a similar product. Publishers are those most affected by this problem, and as such are researching solutions to spread out the revenue generated by a given title over a longer period. The consequences of this on all aspects of a game's development will be major, as a game will have to be built around this need. What solutions are worth exploring? Multiplayer gaming to the rescue. The first avenue lies in the development of a multiplayer mode. A few recent titles such as Call of Duty 4 have clearly made this choice. The solo campaign is breathtaking but brief. The publisher relied on the multiplayer mode to gain profit on its title and to increase its shelf life. The multiplayer's role in securing a successful title can be taken further if the developers give tools to the players themselves, with which to enrich the game by creating maps or mods. The latter can unexpectedly increase the interest given to a game. Epic has grasped this very well. Unreal Tournament 2004 and UT3 were conceived to encourage the players to develop their own content. Of course, the development of mods does require not only that the game engine allows it, but also that the game's basic design is sufficiently flexible to accommodate new uses. Downloadable content. A game can be developed in a modular way, designed to support future levels, game modes, new assets such as vehicles, etc. The key is to make these add-ons available via paying subscriptions or micropayments. Paying for downloadable content for a solo game is not too popular today with Western gamers, but this may change. The concept is already accepted by millions of players who pay their monthly subscriptions for massively multiplayer games. On the other hand, the use of microtransactions to generate revenue is quite common in Asia, so much so that we can talk about the emergence of a truly alternative economic model. It boasts the advantage of being an efficient weapon against piracy, the scourge plaguing Asia on a large scale beyond the awareness of many studios. It is probable that a sufficient number of players will accept purchasing online content, assuming said content is of high enough quality relative to the price. The game design will need to be adaptable enough to allow such add-ons. Personally, I have great faith in the emergence of micropayments. Purchase a map, a game mode, character, accessories or equipment, episodes, etc. as a new economic model for our industry. It will not replace the current model, but rather complement it. A closer collaboration between game design teams and marketing teams in the earlier project stages will be a crucial point in facing up to this challenge. Merchandising. Today's games feature rich and popular universes, which may yield products taking many forms: action figures, manga, comics, ornaments, school supplies, ringtones, animated series, or even novels, theatrical screenplays, or the much wider broadcast of video game tournaments. Yes, you read correctly. I am convinced here that we will get there. Some games will be given more compelling shows than others, in a sense of being watched and understood by viewers. The multiplayer modes of Splinter Cell, Pandora Tomorrow, and Chaos Theory, on which I have worked as a lead-level designer, would work particularly well. But why, you ask? Firstly, because the game's rhythm is slow. It's a stealth game, after all, and thus allows a spectator to understand the action that he's seeing on the screen. Secondly, the game offers so many tactical options that each playing session will feature great diversity. And lastly, the game's situations often take a cinematic dimension. Watch a good player drawn-in multiplayer match of Chaos Theory and judge for yourself. Online distribution. New distribution modes have arisen over the past year. The buy and download mode, the games on demand mode, and the try and buy mode. Buy and download refers to buying a game and downloading it, as the name kinda says. By all appearances, this mode of distribution does not bring anything new to the traditional sales model, beyond the fact that the buyer does not have to leave the house. However, its real potential lies elsewhere. Online distribution allows for greater flexibility in sales price, and thus for better adaptation of price according to demand. It offers the possibility of bringing back old titles. Most of all, it allows for custom tailoring of offers, since a digital distributor can know its clients better than a traditional seller, thanks to the analysis of their consuming habits, and thus can communicate with them swiftly and directly. This formula has shown great success on the Xbox Live marketplace. Games on demand suggests a different economic model. The player pays for a monthly subscription, affording him unlimited access to a vast number of games. The leaders in this market are Metaboli in Europe and GameTap in the United States. This formula, growing in scale in Europe, allows publishers to generate revenue without any burden of cost. It works for older games as much as for newer ones, since experience shows that the impact on traditional sales is minimal. Last but not least, the try and buy model is also self-explanatory. Players download the game and try it, and may buy it online if they enjoy it. This formula works best with casual titles with low downloading volume. High loading times would likely deter potential buyers and accrue high bandwidth costs for the publisher. This model is thus poorly adapted to big titles, but works perfectly for less ambitious games or games relying on micropayments. Megatrend number 2. The emergence of fast gaming and games relying on micropayments. Let us start with fast gaming, which is to video games what fast food is to home cooking, i.e. games bought quickly and consumed without any important investment from the player. Note that the investment is not exclusively financial. It can also refer to the time spent in mastering the game. Make no mistake, I'm not making any value judgment on either this particular type of gaming or a restaurant. If fast food became so popular, it is simply because it answered an existing consumer need. The same is true for fast gaming. These games already abound around us. Downloadable games on your cell phone, budget PC games created to be sold under $20, not to be confused with initially priced games receiving a price drop from the publisher to prolong their commercial lifetimes, double games in the try-and-buy format, and free games serving an advertisement media. These products respond to a new need, the one for immediate gaming without forethought. The purchase and consumption of these games is more of an impulse than an informed acquisition. The success of the Xbox Live marketplace rests largely on this motivation. Let us not forget that full-price games are costly, and the consumer who does not think twice before snapping out his or her credit card is rare. The design of these games will thus have to adapt to the new way of consuming games, which players would not have bothered paying for otherwise. If the games do not bring sufficient immediate gratification, their users will quickly abandon them. Players will be willing to spend more time discovering games they have paid for than those obtained freely. Gameplay must therefore be instantaneous, i.e. the interface kept simple and the player's objectives shown clearly. This necessity is all the more obvious for cell phone games. The current trend is to draw inspiration from concepts and controls found in console gaming, adapting them as fully as possible to the mobile format. The results are a mixed bag. We shall probably see new concepts native to mobile platforms and largely removed from those console games arise. These new concepts would draw from cell phone specifications, communication, geolocation, near constant presence of the owner, integrated cameras, etc., and would disregard their limitations, small keyboard, tiny screens, etc. We may thus see games interacting with current sporting events or even cultural, political, and economic trends. We might even witness the apparition of games centered on socializing. Who knows, after speed dating we might have to prepare ourselves for game dating. Games relying on micropayments are founded on somewhat different logic. Like fast gaming, these games are conceived to be immediate hands-on experiences, but are also designed to entice players to deepen their experience of the game by purchasing affordable additional components. These components vary from simple cosmetic elements, such as improvements on the appearance of the player's avatar, to elements affecting the gameplay itself. This economic model is fast-growing in Asia, and we can expect to witness an important impact on the West, perhaps even a major one. The design for such games will have to be thoroughly adapted, even for established genres such as racing or shooters. The first constraint is the ease of setup. All must be arranged so that the player has minimal number of actions to perform before playing. Today, the great majority of downloadable games ask much of the player. One must first register online by often giving too much information, validate the registration by accessing one's email client, download a typically sizable file whilst hoping that the connection stays stable, unzip and install the game, and finally register and download updates. All of these operations can be simplified or rendered invisible to the player. Another solution is to develop games strictly for internet browsers. Instant Action is one of the pioneers in this field. Secondly, the game mechanics themselves must be simplified as possible so that they will be easy to grasp and master. This does not mean that the game cannot retain any complexity, rather it ought to be introduced progressively. Lastly, the game design must support a great number of add-ons and upgrades without leading to blatantly unbalanced players. Interesting solutions are surfacing, such as equipment rental in Warrock, or systems grouping more or less advanced players together. Megatrend number 3. Increasingly believable universes. This trend shall surprise no one. Each year we witness progress everywhere. Facial animations, increasingly detailed character and background models, lifelike physics, atmospheric effects, dynamic lighting, and so forth. All of these features are must-haves for current game production. What can we expect in coming years? Here are some likely tendencies and their consequences for game design. Development of outdoor environments. Today's gaming platforms are beginning to display both vast perspectives and lush worlds. It is no random chance that action games mostly occurred indoors up until now. Far Cry for the PC was ahead of its time in terms of rendering and utilizing outdoor environments, yet still only scratched the surface, as future game design will need to take further advantage of these perspectives. For action games, vast panoramas allow spotting one's opponent from afar and vice versa. New gameplay systems will thus unfold: camouflage, new remote detection mechanisms, or disruption of the latter, fusion between horizontal, on-the-ground, and vertical airborne gameplay, use of atmospheric effects, etc. Real-time impact of atmospheric effects. Today we know how to create rain, mist, or smoke, but we cannot interact with them. New gameplay applications shall appear. Wind can directly impact the controls of a vehicle, or it may propagate or dissipate a smoke column, as determined by player interaction. Rain can be channeled by a background element, perhaps through the player's actions, thus transforming it into a torrent. Automatic integration of character animation with the environment. Today, character animations are fixed according to predefined environmental elements. Tomorrow, we shall no doubt see characters whose animation will automatically adapt to the environment. From a design point of view, it will become possible to make the characters act in environments completely based on reality. Assassin's Creed shows the way. This trend seems increasingly obvious as we see more third-person action games being developed. In these games, the player sees the character and his interactions with the environment and other entities of the game. The quality of the animations become a key factor. Completely interactive environments. Interaction with background elements means that said elements ought to react like the world surrounding us would. Thus, every object can be moved, flipped, or broken according to its nature and the action applied to it. The games of this current generation are starting to offer real possibilities in this realm. Higher interactivity with the background shall doubtlessly contribute to the game's realism, but what would it bring to game design? It will first offer the players the pleasure of wrecking whatever they want. While morally debatable, my own experience has shown that it is a powerful motivating agent. A game such as Burnout, for instance, greatly relies on answering this need. Moreover, environmental interactivity shall especially allow for further development of what we call systematic game design. In this thoroughly ambitious approach to design, the player is placed in a universe led by its own rules, and it is up to him to find solutions to overcome the trials he encounters. His only real guide thus becomes his common sense, since he knows the game's universe works like the real one. Many first-person shooters such as Denied Ops and Battlefield Bad Company are developing innovative gameplay along these lines. Megatrend number 4. Games are increasingly easy to grasp. This is one of the trends which has most affected game design in recent years, and it's not stopping. Remember those games without tutorials and when documentation was as thick as a phone book, or the first level where you could barely understand what you had to do, let alone how to do it? The progress made in this area in recent years is impressive. The progressive introduction of features and simplification of interfaces and the inclusion of levels created for the discovery of the game itself are the most obvious examples. Even so, this exemplary effort probably won't stop here, as new need for immediate accessibility are emerging. New needs in terms of accessibility. Number 1. Market growth and the increasing number of casual players. Video gaming has long lost its status as a hobby for a small number of addicts and is gradually joining the other mainstream media. The loss of the influence of the core PC market is a good illustration of this trend. This arrival of gaming into the mainstream should be seen as a good thing. Small niche markets cannot attract massive financing. However, it also means that traditional gamers no longer constitute the majority of game users. We must therefore simplify the accessibility of a game for users if we want to support the current growth of the number of game players. Number 2. The development of multiplayer modes. Multiplayer gaming generates particular accessibility problems. In a single-player game, the player learns to face the challenges progressively, with difficulties introduced one at a time, giving time for the player to master them at his own pace. In a multiplayer game, however, the player is directly confronted with the most formidable of all challenges, other players. Even if the player has had the opportunity to master the single-player game through the single-player levels, he will inevitably run into players who have dozens of hours of practice and who possess much more cunning than mere bots. Thus we have a rude awakening for the player, who will have to accept the humiliation of accumulating multiple defeats in order to learn effective strategies for this game mode. The problem of accessibility is no longer merely an issue of mastering the controls or knowing the game, but understanding all aspects of the game at once. The development of multiplayer gaming will create new accessibility challenges, as we will have to accommodate for a growing number of novice players. Number 3. New habits of gaming. In parallel to the growing number of casual players, there is an increase in those traditional gamers that now find themselves with a family or a full-time job and thus have to cut back on their gaming. This category of player with less leisure time will demand games offering immediate playability and that are playable in smaller gaming sessions. This need to develop games that are accessible yet not lacking in depth largely explains the near disappearance of flight sims, despite the doubtlessly large number of fans that they have accumulated. Number 4. The arrival of fast gaming and free games relying on microtransactions. By its very nature, fast gaming demands great simplicity, as much as the intuitiveness of the controls as for the initial difficulty setting and ease of understanding of the game. The prospective development of games that are free yet financed by microtransaction make this need of accessibility all the more essential. Once a player pays for a game, he is presumably ready to devote time and energy to it. But it is the opposite in the case of free games. There is no real investment from him. As such, if the game disappoints him by being too complex to handle, he is likely to abandon it immediately. What are the consequences on design of games? Let us now list the major directions that game design is likely to take. First, instinctive grasp. The simplification of control interfaces is not always an application solution to this challenge. Some games simply demand a complex interface to show their full potential. Thus, there is a need to look elsewhere for solutions. One possibility lies in not activating all of the commands and features right at the beginning of the game. Level design will therefore have to take this into account, and this approach will be supported by a prior analysis of the difficulties typically encountered by average gamers. Another interesting take on this issue involves on-screen reminders of controls. We have grown accustomed to this highly efficient system in games from the Zelda series. Another solution was applied by the now defunct studio Looking Glass Studios. In their title Terra Nova, a precursor to squad-based shooters, the player's screen had all of the necessary icons for allowing him to control his team and/or his own equipment. The great wealth of controls was thus made easily and immediately available to all players, independent of prior knowledge to the game's interface. A final possibility lies in the implementation of a game assistant, to be triggered by and offer advice on complex events that the player may encounter. Number 2. Counter early frustration by avoiding failure early in the game. While there are many possible sources of frustration at the beginning of a game, chief among them is probably the player's potential inability to overcome the early challenges. The golden rule is to make sure that the player manages to win at the beginning of a game, and that he avoids getting lost. It is a complex topic, deserving of his own article. For its own purposes here, however, let us cite 3 cases illustrating the issues and their solutions. In adventure games, the problematic element is often the player's inability to work out where to go next or how to solve a puzzle. Solutions to these problems reside primarily in level design. I have already elaborated on this aspect of design in detail in a previous publication on Gamasutra, where I describe help features to troubleshoot a struggling player. Action and strategy games require another solution. Here the challenge of design lies in progressively introducing the richness of the game, possible actions by the player, types of opponents, etc., thereby firmly controlling the learning curve. Number 3. Improving multiplayer modes. Multiplayer game modes pose a tougher problem. The definite answers have yet to be discovered, and I look at 4 different types of solutions. First, simplification of the game concept. The more features that there are to master, the harder it will be for the player to be on equal footing with his opponents. It is this method that was chosen by Ubisoft for development of their multiplayer mode in Splinter Cell 4 Double Agent. As a reminder, the multiplayer mode in Splinter Cell 4 series was introduced in the second release, Pandora Tomorrow, and was improved on the third title, Chaos Theory. This multiplayer mode, developed by the talented Ubisoft studio in Annecy, South France, was hailed by the industry as particularly innovative and compelling. Tellingly, Chaos Theory's multiplayer mode is still played on the Xbox Live. The game is Xbox 360 compatible to this day. This extraordinarily rich mode nonetheless has a cost: its complexity. Having worked as lead level designer and playtesting coordinator on the multiplayer modes of these 2 games, I am well positioned to testify on this problem. While hardcore gamers appreciated the diversity and the sophistication of the tactics that could be used and developed, beginners struggled to simply understand where to go and why. The problem was partially solved in Chaos Theory, but the game remained difficult to master. For Double Agent, Ubisoft gambled on simplifying the controls, the game objectives, and the features. The game's spirit remains intact, but it is much easier to grasp. Progressive introduction of game features and complexity. Gamers discovering a multiplayer mode could unveil new features, increasingly complex maps, and more aggressive game modes as they pass thresholds, such as a number of enemies killed. This mechanism guarantees that a player will not be overwhelmed by a game's complexity, while it retains its richness. It also helps to get the player to play with gamers of equal levels. If implementing this solution, just make sure that it can be easily overridden, as a seasoned player might want to invite a friend to his session no matter what level he is. A ranking system grouping players of similar levels. This mechanism could allow gamers to play in contexts better adapted to their level of skill. All multiplayer games feature ranking systems, but their effectiveness is often questionable when it comes to matching players of similar strengths. The Microsoft TrueSkill ranking system could bring a valuable solution to this issue. Game concepts focusing on cooperative action. Playing alongside highly skilled players is easier and certainly less intimidating than playing against them. Even if the players are grouped in several teams pitted against each other, cooperative gameplay within a team will help the player discover the game progressively. He could be helped by his more seasoned teammates, he could simply follow them, or he could follow less exposed tactics like manning a fixed gun, driving a vehicle, or simply defending a position. Number 3. Games to be played where I want and how I want. Two aspects of design are involved in this concept: learning curve and density. Learning curve. The common solution is to add a tutorial separate from the game itself. But as this has the effect of pushing back the moment the player reaches the heart of the game, games increasingly avoid this method. There are other solutions, however. In the Warcraft series, the numerous facets of games are progressively introduced through the duration of the campaigns. A similar mechanism is used in episodes 2 and 3 of Metal Gear Solid, where radio messages conveniently explain new aspects of the interface. Game density and separation. Demand for products that are playable in short bursts necessitates the building of shorter, denser levels. It also requires features such as autosaving and resuming. Today, this system is increasingly prevalent in console productions. For instance, the positioning of automatic save points in Uncharted Drake's Fortune, Naughty Dog's excellent action shooter, is particularly well done. Save points placed too close to one another remove challenges for the player, since he no longer fears failure, knowing he can restart not very far behind his previous position. On the other hand, spacing them too far apart will frustrate the player who, in the event of a game over, will have to consecutively start over and repeat a long section of the game. Megatrend number 5. Gaming as a teaching tool. Educational games. A novelty in the game industry? Academically themed games aimed at younger kids are nothing new, and are not a megatrend. However, pedagogenic multimedia products targeted at high school kids and college students, or even adults, will no doubt be part of a future development path for our industry. But why? Many teachers will confirm the increasing difficulties involving in grabbing the attention of today's youth. Under constant bombardment by a torrent of stimuli, their attention spans have shrunk to the point where concentrating on any one subject for any significant length of time can be a Herculean task, particularly when the subject is daunting. Some have had the idea to use video games as an academic complement. This type of media has the advantage of being at the heart of teenage leisure, and its nature is well adapted to the best of mankind's teaching mechanisms: experimentation. Many businesses have started down this challenging road, such as the American firm Pull You In. What forms will these games take? Some academic subjects can often be easily translated into games. Let's consider a few examples. Economic sciences. Their mechanisms are well adapted to this exercise, since they apply to a concrete universe which we all know. Management games can be used to support or illustrate theories of international trade, interactions between supply and demand, or the disruption of a competition caused by a monopoly. Mathematics and physics. Despite their highly abstract nature, these sciences have in fact been invented to solve truly concrete problems, such as the building of aqueducts by the Romans. We can imagine interactive illustrations, the launching of a rocket into orbit, or a game with a catapult to illustrate vectors. Biology. The mechanical characteristic of the inner workings of a cell, and therefore any living organism, can be emulated by construction games, such as the famous The Incredible Machine. What game design? Though the ultimate purpose of these interactive products is not gaming for its own sake, game design rules should still be applied with the same care exercised in designing a more traditional video game. Here are some few rules to keep in mind. A theme suitable for targeted audiences, particularly regarding age groups. Game objectives that are simple to understand and that offer truly fulfilling experiences, such as new features. The availability of tools, game features, allowing the player to reach his goal. The development of an environment with consistent rules and behavior. The progressive discovery of the use and limits of the available tools through experimentation. The intuitive interface inspired by standards expected by players. A feedback mechanism allowing the player to assess his progress, and an appropriate handling of difficulty, pace, and replay value. However, such applications will also need to include specific features unique to their academic function, a deep tutorial mechanism for explaining each feature available to the player. To avoid falling into the bloated text explanations, the tutorial segments themselves should be interactive. An auto-exam module allowing the students to test his acquired knowledge, comparing these results to the teacher's expectations. A module for exchange and communication between players and students, to allow for cooperation between themselves as well as with the teacher. An eventual link with the applications developed for the new interactive whiteboards we are now starting to see in classrooms. Perspectives. Ambitious and complex to develop, these game-based academic tools will also need to find their target market, from teachers to parents itching to help their children, and consequently suitable distribution channels. The rapid development of distance learning in the United States, and therefore soon in Europe, may yet create the perfect environment for these products. The Nintendo DS has also shown its potential as a platform for teaching applications. The gaming approach to these academic applications may yet become a powerful commercial argument for newcomers on the education market, one of the flagship markets of our civilization of knowledge. And so we come to the end of Mega Audio article number 71, once again written by Pascal Lubin, who is the founder and manager of www.gamedesignstudio.com. As always, we recommend that you check back frequently to industrybroadcast.com, as we do our very,